Well, what an insane night of fights at UFC 327. My God. Carlos Ulberg, out of nowhere, snatches victory from the jaws of defeat, it seemed, after blowing out his ACL. It looked like everything was going Jiri's way, and then a big left hook put him down. A new light heavyweight champion, Carlos Ulberg, but perhaps a new problem for the UFC if Dr. Stutterer's report is correct and he has sustained an ACL injury. We did hear from him in the post-fight interview saying as much. Wow, what a card. A lot going down here. Paulo Costa with the upset win. Josh Hokit books a place on the White House card against Derek Lewis, apparently after 15 minutes of carnage against Curtis Blades. I mean, we don't need to really get into Reyes and Walker all that much, but there was lots of stuff going on. Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, renewed talks once again. They seem to be at an impasse already. Conor Ben, a bit of an underwhelming debut. Oh, yeah, and the PFL had an event. I did not see a lot of talk about that. I don't know how much we're going to get into it today. Gable Steveson, also signed for the UFC. I'm Petesy Carroll. You might know me from the ArielHelwani show or The Crack on Fridays. Ariel still off gallivanting, so I had to bring some friends along. You might know them from The Crack. It is two of the greatest journalistic minds mixed martial arts has ever known. Ben Fowlkes and Chuck Mindenhall. Boys, it is late. It is 5 a.m. And once again, I'll be relying on you heavily today. Am I so glad to see you. Chuck, how you doing, my friend?
I'm fine. It's only midnight here, and I think where Ben's at, what is it, 10 p.m. there? This is still like the prime of the night right now, right, Ben?
10:03 p.m.
10:03.
My guys.
I mean,
let's get this wrapped up so I can hit the club. Night is young.
Well, lads, we have to start with this main event. Absolutely insane finish to this fight. Ben, are you like me? Were you like, Jiri has this? This seems to be absolutely perfect.
Tell you what, as a guy who has a fondness for Carlos Ulberg, but who had picked Jiri in the staff picks competition, I had conflicted feelings when I saw Ulberg's knee buckle and him go down, because he just kind of went, well, I guess that's that. And you can't help, I feel, in these moments, then like put yourself in that position to imagine what would it be like to be there the first round of your title fight, the thing you worked up to. This is the big moment for you, a big jump up, your first UFC title fight. You're up there against Jiri, and in the first round, first couple minutes of the fight, you feel your knee pop out and you go, well, there it is. And you could see him kind of maybe trying to test it a little bit, like he didn't want to think it was as bad as it was. And you could tell that's bad. That thing is bad. It's not just like, getting a kick on the calf that's going to make the nerves of your foot go dead for a minute. That's a blown out knee, man. You're probably going to need surgery to fix that. How do you not panic in that moment? How do you not at least get super scared and be like, well, there go my hopes of winning. Now am I hoping that something terrible doesn't happen to me? And to stay in there, to stay composed, to stay in that fight, and then win it moments later after that, that's crazy to me. That reminds me, I think, when this sport is good, there's nothing like it, because you see a human being push themselves to do things that maybe they didn't think they could do, or we didn't think they could do. That's the stuff that this sport can really give you. Is it's sort of inspiring to watch somebody be able to do that, to find that within themselves, even in such a difficult moment. Because that's got to be super scary, man. It's scary enough to stand there across from Jiri Prochazka throwing shots at your head, and to do it on one knee and to still find a way to believe in yourself and still find a way to pull it off. It's incredible. I think that goes down as one of the most memorable performances we've seen in the UFC in a long time.
Chuck, Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, going off what Ben was saying, I mean, like being backed into a corner like that too, because everybody knows who's watching this fight, everybody in the arena, because you can see it clearly that the leg is compromised. To be backed in the corner with basically, what was it, like 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes to go in that round, knowing that if it goes to the end of the round, there's a good chance that the fight is over. There's just a good chance that you won't be able to answer the bell. And knowing that, your chance is really what it was. Like you got to just go for a knockout to stay poised in that situation. And, in a fight that you've put like so much time and energy to arrive at, and then to pull that off, it's you can look at this two ways, man. You know, from Carlos's perspective, you're going to say like this is an amazing show of heart, and like, you know, to do that and to get that knockout, it's going to be something that stays with him forever. And from Jiri's, and I mean that was a very sad post-fight interview. And you know what, dude? Like, he's a human being, and he's basically admitting like you can't be a human being in there like that when you're trying to finish the fight. He's talking about you know, basically having mercy on the guy and letting him off the hook. That's going to sting him for a long time, especially considering that this was his third fight for this, right? Like the third time he gets it. Now he's in that terrain where it's going to be very, very difficult for him to get back there. Very tragic. But I mean, like Ben was saying, it's one of those fights that you're going to think about for a long time because it has such deep stakes and dimensions to it and so much repercussion to it. Just crazy. You know what I mean? Like, you get a fight like this once in a while, and you got to kind of savor it for all that it's worth.
Absolutely. Ulberg, of course, out of City Kickboxing, great scenes with him and Eugene Berman at the end of that fight there. I'm sure Eugene was thinking along the same lines as us. How is this guy going to do this on one leg? He somehow managed to get it done. I'm still kind of spellbound by the situation here. And I'm not trying to take away from Ulberg's win here, but it does get me thinking, right? You know, Pereira moves up to heavyweight. We need a new champion in this division. You have Jiri there and Carlos, two very exciting fighters. No issue there. But suddenly, and the report we got from Rick just before we went live there was that it looked like an ACL injury. Ulberg told Joe Rogan after the fact that he blew out his knee. We saw the video replays on the broadcast. Chuck, I can't help but wonder, like, is this another impasse for the light heavyweight division, having been looking to crown a new champion to keep these belts active?
I mean, somebody should check Uncle Iev's like Chester drawers and see if he's got like a little voodoo doll or something he's working, because something's going on. I mean, like, it's clear that, you know, a guy like him, they weren't kind of expediting back into the line, but this does kind of bring up, I mean, if you're looking at a typical ACL, and I know that like doctors these days can work wonders. The timetable isn't what it used to be. It used to be like a year. And Ben knows this from playing football. Back in the day, if you had an ACL, you were out a year. I feel like they've shortened that to 9 months, you know, if everything goes well. But it's still one of those things, like 9 months is a long time from now. I have no idea. And of course, we're speculating on this, but that was the first thing that when this happened, you know, once you kind of absorb like, oh my God, he just knocked him out, the one thing, a Hail Mary type situation. The next thing that crosses your mind, like, how bad is his knee injury? Because is he going to be out for a while? Because we're going to be right back into a complicated situation. This was already for a vacant title, so it's not like the linear part of it is already sort of compromised, and then you're going to go off on an interim thing, and it starts to get very strange at that point. So it'll be interesting to see what this is. If it's an ACL, though, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that's the route the UFC has to go.
It is a troublesome situation.
That's rough, though, isn't it? Like, you had the champion vacate the title, so you do this fight to crown a new champion. The champion hurts himself in the win, and yet it's also such a star-making moment for him. Mm-hmm. And then just have to kind of go away and have the UFC move on with the division temporarily, for the sake of scheduling? That sucks. You know, that's where I wish the UFC had a little less of a hair trigger when it comes to, hey, we got to have a belt in rotation. We just pull another one out of the supply closet. Let's throw it on there. This should be one of the upsides of us not having to sell pay-per-views anymore, of us being in the Paramount Plus era, was that, hey, we went like the first 4 months of the year with hardly any title fights. Well, let us put the light heavyweight division in a little bit of sleep mode, if you will. Let's figure out what's going on there. And let's let Carlos Ulberg have a chance to see what the timetable is to return from that. And you're right, Chuck. I think that it's not as bad as it once was. You got to think we're flying him into surgery tonight if we can. Wow. You know, we're waking up a doctor like he's the veterinarian in Heat who has to stitch people up after the gunfight. So we're getting on the operating table as soon as we possibly can to try to fix this and increase the recovery time. But it also seems like you look around at the light heavyweight division right now. You guys watched Dominic Reyes and Johnny Walker fight, right? Like,
that barn wasn't going to burn. You know what I mean?
There was a moment in that fight where Daniel Cormier started talking about a shepherd's pie that Johnny Walker's wife had made for the boys one time and how good it was. And for me as a viewer, that might have been the highlight of the fight.
Oh man.
I say that to say this. We're not exactly overwhelmed by contenders
Right.
at light heavyweight.
That's
right now.
the
I mean,
thing.
Paulo Costa had a great night in his first fight at light heavyweight since That's Your Own Personal Problem fight. But in the process, he knocked off a undefeated number 6 contender in the division. He's not really putting himself in a position where you can see Paulo Costa after one win at light heavyweight turn around fighting for a title. So you don't have so much interesting stuff that you absolutely got to move on and have some kind of a title fight. Maybe light heavyweight needs some time to sort itself out a little bit and let Carlos Ulberg come back from this.
I can't help but think that when you're mentioning the 9 months, Chuck, and the quick recovery we can have, the first thing that popped into my head is Jamal Hill rushing back to get knocked out by Alex Pereira at UFC 300. And at the time, everybody was comparing his injury to Aaron Rodgers, I believe it was, who had crashed out in the first game of the season for the New York Jets. Shout out Jordan. And I also can't help but think, as you went through all of the issues that the UFC have gone to make this light heavyweight title fight, Ben, Alex Pereira is going up to fight an interim title fight against Cyril Gane. It doesn't really make sense on a grand scale as we wish it would, right? Like, this feels like they're just moving too many things around to justify small things, and it's kind of ending up in a bigger mess.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with this sport is you can't look too far down the road because there's always weird shit that's going to happen and completely derail all your best plans, right? So like you could make yourself an interim title fight and somebody could blow their knee out in training. We could have a line at the ACL surgeon's office before you know it. Like that stuff can absolutely happen. I tend to think like, let's preserve whatever title lineage we can get going whenever possible. If we're looking at that, the recovery is inside of a year. How often have we seen the light heavyweight title defended? I mean, Alex Pereira was one of the more active champions, but when John Jones was defending it, and it was just you see it defended once a year, that kind of a thing. If you could get 2 in a year, that's practically a breakneck pace. So I'm in favor of like, let's have a little bit more patience with it. Grab a BMF belt. We must have a lot of those sitting around. If we really got to put some gold on a poster every now and then, let's do some stuff like that. It just, especially like such a moment like this, it almost seems to cheapen it. If you go, oh man, isn't it amazing he won the title while he's hurt? Anyway, he's hurt. So now somebody else has to have that title. And
he is stripped. He is now stripped of the title.
They should strip him now. I mean,
you obviously can't do that. I mean, I do wonder, like, for me, the thing that's going to make this such a memorable moment is not just Carlos Ulberg being able to pull that off. The interview from Jiri broke my heart just now.
That was bad.
Just because I was wondering when I was watching his reaction to it, where he seemed to kind of be saying like, oh, I see, you can't really move around too much. Let's just both stand here then. Yeah. Let's both stand here and let's trade. It almost was like the Jiri Prochazka Bushido code demanded that he tried to level the playing field a little bit for his opponent to keep him in the fight. And because there were a couple moments where he's kicking that other leg, and I was thinking about, remember, I think it was Jose Aldo against the Korean Zombie in their fight, where the Zombie's shoulder kind of went out. His he threw a punch, he missed, his shoulder went out, and Aldo clocked it immediately and was like, "Oh, okay, it was that one. I'm gonna kick you right in that shoulder."
Yes.
I mean, and and it was cruel and it was unforgiving, but it was also the fight game, and it was just a good reminder of like how brutal a sport this was, where it's just like, oh, you're an injured gazelle at the watering hole. We're going to eat you first. As soon as you showed any sort of signs of injury or weakness, we are going to attack that injury or weakness like at the very spot, because we're playing a hurting game here. We're fighting over a big sack of money. There's no friends. There's no mercy in that environment. And Jiri, it was almost like that's a man who, we joke about him and his like samurai stuff. He lives it, man. Yeah. He believes that. That is a big part of like the core of his being. And it seemed like honor dictated that he not do that, even though he kind of knew he should. And it's sad to think of him sitting around in a hotel room tonight being like, I messed up by having too much honor in that fight. I should have just gone ahead and stomped on the guy's other knee.
It's
That makes me
just
sad.
like, what? I mean, what's the closest equivalent to this? I mean, you're not going to call Jiri when you're going to put down Old Yeller, that's for sure, because he's not going to have the stomach for that type of thing. But I mean, honestly, what came to my mind was, remember when Rich Franklin broke his right hand against Chuck Liddell, and you're like, uh-oh, this might be Chuck's chance. So Chuck moves in, and what's he do? He knocks him out with his left. Do you remember that?
I think he broke his forearm, right? Because he blocked the kick, I think.
Yeah, he broke so threw his offhand and still knocked him out. It was like that, but the difference was that was a main event, but it wasn't a title fight. I was trying to think, I just don't know if we've seen anything, unless it's just slipping my mind, where something that dramatic happens. But to have to live with it, see, it's not like that. Imagine if this was Yuri's first time, fighting for the title. You'd probably be like, he'll get back there. The problem was, and the complexity is, that the UFC would have to really, play some favoritism to put him back in that spot. Even if they did, right now, if they said, we're going to do an interim title, to put Jiri back into that would seem very strange to me. So that's why it's going to suck. I mean, it legit could be his last chance fighting for the belt. You hope not, but it could be, and that means it will stay with him forever.
Yeah,
I'm reminded of the film Troy, where Brad Pitt plays Achilles, and he and Eric Bana, who is Hector, they're fighting outside the city walls. They both got a shield and a spear. Yeah, you've seen it. And at some point, Achilles winning the entire time due to being a demigod and whatnot. And Hector loses his shield at some point in the fight, and Achilles throws his shield off to be like, all right, hey, I'm going to make it fair because I want to beat you fair. Now, again, demigod and whatnot, you do end up winning that one anyway. Jiri, a mere mortal, maybe pays for that. The gods teaching him a particularly painful lesson there. But man, that is the kind of stuff that fight sports can give you in a way that nothing else can really give you. Other sports just cannot give you those kind of moments. This is always when I say that, this sport has plenty of things that'll just make you tear your hair out and wonder why you do this with your Saturday night sometimes. And then it has some stuff like this where you go, this is the kind of human drama, the real life human drama that you're just not getting from a hockey game.
Although hockey comes closest, I would say. That's
yeah.
Yeah.
To be honest. I believe Dave Chappelle used to call us situations like this when keeping it real goes wrong. That's essentially what happened with poor old Jiri. But Ben, you mentioned Paulo Costa, and Chuck, I gotta ask you, because you also mentioned the picks earlier on, Ben. Every single member of the uncrowned team,
I know,
was on Azamat Murzakanov. I also said when this fight was announced that Murzakanov, and I quote, would splatter Paulo Costa.
Yeah,
he did not. In fact, Costa was the man who got splattered. Costa was the man who did the splattering. He head kicked Murzakanov. Murzakanov had to go to the hospital. Pretty impressive stuff, Chuck.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's one of those fights. And honestly, if there weren't a couple of other crazy fights, we'd be talking about this one probably. Just given that the tables kind of turned a couple of times in this, I thought Paulo Costa was done. He was huffing air in that second round. He just looked like he'd had it. It actually started to remind me of the Salt Lake City fight he had against Rockhold, where basically both guys kind of died on the vine about midway through, and then it just became this very crazy, exhausting fight. This had that feeling, but this time it was almost like he found the reserves or something, because even late second round, there was a little bit of a turning of the tables there where he ends up in the better position, but then he comes out with these high kicks and just gets it done. I mean, you don't really see that kind of turnaround in a fight. Once it starts taking on a certain kind of pattern, that's usually what it keeps. So I give him a ton of kudos, man. I did not see that coming. You mentioned the Murzakanov, saying he was going to splatter him. I think I was on record too, basically, I was saying this would be the one kind of squash match on this fight card. And I didn't really understand why they put Costa into this event. I mean, in that situation, unless they were trying to kind of, show him that it's a whole different game at 205 or something like that. It felt like a setup to me, but boy, did he prove me wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? The thing about Paulo Costa is that there are so many times where it just feels like this guy's not even taking this seriously. And it's fun.
No, it's true.
it's a fun vibe to have around, and yet you also just sort of feel like it's a lark at times for him, and he's just kind of like whatever. And like in this fight where you're just like, okay, there are moments in it where you're like, this is what I thought would happen. We're headed the direction that I thought we would. And then he comes out for round 3 and he's just like, to hell with it. I'm gonna go right at this guy and see what we can get done. And you just go, man, Paulo Costa winning fights over undefeated ranked light heavyweights in 2026. He seemed done 4 years ago. To be able to turn that around and do something like this here, you're just like, what do you even do with this guy? And what do any of us expect out of him anymore? Because it kind of seems like now you could put him in against most light heavyweights and he could lose or win any fight. he could screw it up, or he could just come out of nowhere, put together 30 good seconds and win it. It's fun, but it's a fun sort of chaos to have in the division right now.
Although the timely, in the sense of what we're talking about, where there just aren't a lot of contenders, and now in a very murky situation at the top of the division. If Mirzakhanov wins, obviously, like, you have a pretty clear guy that you could talk about, Ankalaev being up there. But like, given the way this shook out, like Costa's victory seems like it's kind of like enhanced, in that sense where you're like, okay, well, in a pinch, he could be put into a big fight just, given his name and where he's been as a middleweight. We've seen the UFC make those kinds of exceptions before. So in a strange way, this might have been like, he might have stole the show in the way of like pole positioning in his new division. So, but I mean, I wouldn't be, honestly, that version of him when he kind of shows up in that form and is able to take a fight, I've always liked him. I've always dug what he's able to do when he's like that. But what you just mentioned is what has bothered me, this kind of level of lark or disinterest where you're like, I don't know how bad he wants it all the time. So I got to see kind of more of a sustained version of this before I get too excited.
He does feel like one of the most fan favorite guys in the division, though. Purely based on like his personality and obviously his fight and stuff, coming off a head kick KO, basically, it's unbelievable. And to your point, I'm looking at the rankings here. There are a lot of interesting fights you could put him in. Just a lot of strikers at 205 as well. He's an interesting guy to have in a time where they are going to struggle now, especially if this injury to Ulberg, the newly crowned champion, is as bad as we are thinking. However, we can't really be speaking about someone being on a lark after that Josh Hokit fight. We have to be talking about him if we're talking about larks. I mean, this was absolutely fucking insane. What an insane fight that was. I mean, I couldn't believe it was happening as I was watching it. You're like, was my brain melted at this point? Like, where has this come from? First of all, I thought he was finished in the first round. I thought he had nearly finished Curtis Blades, and then towards the end of the round, Curtis Blades just starts letting his hands go. And Hokit's doing this thing where he's getting hit, and it's like, it almost looks like he's rocking, but I think he's using that as a way to lure Blades in. Let's not forget the amount of kind of showmanship, we'll call it, his own unique brand of showmanship he's been delivering all week. We can see the image here of him flipping the board, which he did about 19 times during this fight. Gets the win, deserves the win.
Struggling. He was struggling. I saw Chuck mention it. That he said he'd never seen a guy who seemed like he was getting too exhausted to flip the bird. The last couple birds did not have a ton of tweet in them,
Yeah, but it's a huge leap, right? Like I honestly thought this was way too much. He's biting off way more than he can chew. He hasn't fought. I can't name the guys off the top of my head that he's fought in the UFC right now. I believe one of them is called Denzel. I'm not too sure about that. But this is a huge step up against Curtis Blades. Blades has been around. He's been a perennial contender for the guts of a decade. And Hokit's after going in there and becoming one of the most talked about guys from this card. It's pretty incredible considering where the appetite for him was in the lead up to this fight. Despite being one of the most talked about people on this card, it was not for very positive reasons, but I feel like people are coming away kind of rejoicing in the fact that there's a heavyweight making a lot of noise who seems to want to be active based on the fact that Dana White has announced that he's going to be fighting Derek Lewis because, well, Donald Trump wanted him to.
I mean, he brought out a different side of Blades, right? Like that in itself, you're like, wow, we had to like look at this version of Blades that we never knew existed. That alone is like something that just like a new coat of paint or something on that division. I honestly was a little bit surprised that Blades was. I mean, he was getting pieced out. I thought there'd be a speed advantage for Hokit. Like, I thought that would exist. I just thought Blades would be able to wrestle a little more, maybe put the fight where he wanted a little more, and then just kind of pour it on him at some point in ways that you just get offense. I mean, and he did do that to an extent, but it just was not sustainable. But dude, watching that first round, that pace, the way that they were going at each other, you're like, this fight if it goes to the second round, they're not going to be able to throw punches. For them to find the reserves to keep going for 15 minutes is like almost like nothing. You ever see the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey when it's like the guy's like, zooming through deep parts of space and you're like, where is it going? Where's it all going? It ends up in like some white room. Have you seen that? The end of that movie?
Of course.
Okay. So it's like that's what it felt like. It was like it had that weird feeling of like we're in places we've never seen before. Like these guys are still going at it at like such a crazy pace. I was astonished. I mean, the first round, all of us are like, dude, this is nuts. But for us to say that in a heavyweight fight at the end of the third round because they were still doing that is insane.
Yeah, and DC said something where I thought it was actually an astute moment of commentary. He was like, it looks like Curtis Blades is refusing to go down out of ego, like out of spite, basically, where he was just like, no, this dude is not this dude.
It seemed that way.
Because there he was taking some shots, man. And
he's like a butcher's block.
Yeah, he was the very picture of what you imagine when you hear the phrase "beaten to a pulp."
Yes,
just
that's
like
what it was.
Bloody hamburger for his face, and he's still
it's less wet.
Taking those shots and just like would not go away because he was just like, I cannot abide this guy knocking me out. And yet at the same time, you're just like, Josh Hokit might get so exhausted he just falls over.
Yeah,
at some point. He also, you could hear Greg Jackson in his kindly way trying to tell him, what I want you to do is to throw 4 straight punches.
I heard this.
And then get out of the way, man. Like, move your head, get out of the way, because he is just there to be hit. He's standing there and he's throwing, and he's just sort of looking at Curtis Blades afterwards, like, okay, your turn. And that's the thing I think, man, you better not fight Derek Lewis like that. You go out there. The thing is, though, you say like this is a big jump up. You could imagine him doing this Curtis Blades. I don't know if you looked at the staff picks too closely. There is at least one staff member who picked Hokit in this fight.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
I thought
it was all. I thought it was everybody.
And it's because just like what we've seen from Curtis Blades, that last fight from Curtis Blades, he does seem to be on the decline. He had this time where he was the guy who only lost to the very best. And it doesn't seem like he's that same guy anymore. It's just like seems like he's slowed down a little too much. He's a little too hittable at this point, and the wrestling isn't saving him the way that it used to. So I do think that this is the most beatable version of Curtis Blades that Josh Hokit got to fight. At the same time, it was so hard to know what to make of Josh Hokit because, like you said, Petesy, it's like, yeah, you did look like you were going out there beating up Uber drivers, but you were beating them up. Like it's we don't know what to make of this guy just yet. I think one thing that we definitely learned is that he's got some toughness, he's got some heart and some grit in him, because a lot of people in that first round, when you pour it all on this guy and he's still there and he's coming back after you, a lot of people crumble there because it's just like he sort of hit a wall in terms of like cardiovascular fitness.
Yeah, man.
And he had to push through it. If you'd have told me yesterday these two guys were going to go all 3 rounds, I'd have been like, well, that's going to be a boring decision win for Curtis Blades. Never did I think it was going to be like one of the best fights of the year so far.
Yeah, man. Let me ask you guys this, because I went into this and I was sort of like, I was talking to Luke Thomas and we were basically, the shtick's already kind of old. Hokit's not even out of the gate, and you're already kind of like, it's kind of tired, whatever. After this fight week, and now after watching him, does he change that a little bit? I felt like if anything, I saw him in a different light, and I was like, all right, I'm willing to kind of see what this dude can do.
Yeah, well, I think he makes people care about fights at heavyweight. And that is something that
Yeah.
the UFC cannot buy at the moment. You know, there was so many people that wanted to watch Hokit get his ass kicked tonight, but
Yeah,
he puts
true.
on a performance like that, which is very unique. We do not see this as heavyweight, an exciting fight over 3 rounds. He didn't seem to go away. There's going to be a lot of back and forth between him and whoever you put him against, no matter how cringeworthy it is. People are going to watch it. It's going to do a lot of traffic online. I completely thought he was out of touch with everything he was saying, out of time. You know, it just felt like 5 years too late. And here I am going, well, shit, I'm glad he's here. You know, I'm sure the UFC are thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
And he remembered his whole poem at the end after all
That's
that.
impressive, right?
That was impressive. I have to say that was impressive. Are you guys
poem.
surprised though? It's like that fight, the way it played out was like he was in 3 car crashes, 1 per round, you know? And then they're like, hey, he's going to fight at the White House card next month. Does that surprise you guys at all?
Well, it's
Yeah.
fucking
I mean, that's a lot to go, especially because it's like there's no way this soon after a fight like that, like when they come to you and be like, hey, what do you say? Mid-June, do you think you'll be ready to fight Derek Lewis? You can say yes in that moment. There's no way you really know yet if that's a good answer or not, because you know you're gonna wake up tomorrow and you're gonna feel rough, and it's gonna take a little while. Like even fights like this, like you talk to fighters about how bad their body feels even after a win when you've gone, you know, 3 rounds and 3 rounds of a lot of punching, just your hands. You're not going to be able to do much with your hands for the next week or so. They're going to be so swollen and sore after all that, like hitting the cement block of Curtis Blades' head as much as he did. And so to know for sure, like, oh yeah, 2 months from now, I'll be good to go. You don't know that. You really don't. You're hoping, and you're also probably just feeling like career-wise, opportunity-wise, I can't say no. I don't want to be the guy who turned down this fight. You know,
the president asked for it. You know what I mean? What are you meant to say? He's standing there. He wants you to fight. You're wearing an America bandana. I mean,
yeah. I mean, there is a reasonable point to be made that the president had other pretty pressing issues he might have been more concerned about tonight, other than getting Josh Hokit on the White House card. But I guess that's a conversation for another day. It just seems like, yeah, it's a gamble. I'm sure it's a calculated gamble, but you're going to go in there against Derek Lewis, who, if you fight Derek Lewis the right way, as we've seen recently, you can beat Derek Lewis right now. You know,
Hokit's not going to fight him the right way.
That's the thing, though.
better not.
That's
better
the thing, is that there is a very wrong way to fight Derek Lewis, and it seems like Josh Hokit could be convinced to attempt that way.
Funny you should say the wrong way to fight someone, because it seems that Dominic Reyes and Johnny Walker both picked the wrong way to defeat someone. It was so bad. It was so bad. And I was going to go, the card's been so good, and now this is on. And you kind of look, when you see Johnny Walker on a card against a guy who's knocked out people before, you kind of go, you know, I believe it was you who said this before, Ben, like he just kind of gets knocked out weird, you know?
Yeah.
He has a
he's going to get hit on the chin, and he's going to look like the inflatable guy outside the car wash as he falls down. Like that's what you're thinking is going to happen.
Exactly.
Instead, it was like the whole fight was both these guys being like, I don't know. I don't want to get too close because the other guy might be able to hit me. And you just kept waiting for it to kick up a notch. You kept being like, all right, they're kind of feeling out the range. Dominic Reyes, especially. Yeah, it is. Because you're just, especially with Dominic Reyes, you were like, you're doing well, man. You're like, when you go and you do some stuff, you're able to do what you want to do. You're able to throw that straight left and clip him with it. Let's see if we can go ahead and do that a little more. And he never seemed like to find that sense of urgency about it. Neither one of them did. They both seemed like, I'd rather stay out here out of harm's way. And you got just one of those fights that makes you look at the light heavyweight division and be like, I remember when this used to be the glamour division of the UFC.
Those feel like a million years ago. It reminded me a little bit of the fight that we just saw with MVP and Patterson, like in the sense, like, neither guy is really that willing to engage. You know what I mean? And you're like, okay, well, if nobody's going to engage, we're going to get 15 minutes of this. And that's why that crowd could sense that and starts chanting that. What were they saying? Like, this is boring. Like, it was a funny chant.
Yeah.
This fight sucks or something, is it?
Yeah, I think they were saying this fight is boring.
I think they're saying this is boring.
This is boring,
which is just they're like we can't even be troubled to come up with like a snappy chant. We're just straight up telling you.
That's why it's funny. Yeah, but I mean, and once that was going on, didn't feel like, oh, we're getting 15 minutes of this. I did not expect anything to happen at that point.
Neither of them wanted to win that fight. They were standing there waiting for they're just like, I don't actually fucking care. And then, like, both could have won it because who the fuck was even counting at that stage, And they lifted someone's arm. You kind of see Johnny Wilkin. I was like, oh, well, fuck it, Maybe.
I did mark down on my grocery list, though, the ingredients for the shepherd's pie I'm going to make that tomorrow night. I had a good idea during that fight.
I also love that he called it an Irish pie because I was just like, I see what you're getting at, Like, I understand. And because you start describing a shepherd's pie you had one time, and I'm going, who doesn't love a shepherd's pie? Especially,
I was thinking about it. I would love one right now.
You look at DC and you're like, there's a guy who would appreciate a hearty shepherd's pie. Yeah. But also, that was round one, and we're already in reminiscing about good meals we've had territory. Oof. Yeah, that's rough.
Ben, I got to ask you something. What did you think of Joe Rogan's, very cold reception of President Trump when he came over there? Like, that seemed like he was sticking to his guns, didn't it? A little bit.
Yeah. What did he call himself? Politically homeless these days? Sure. Yes. Didn't exactly seem like he was torn on the whole thing there. It seemed like, it also though seems like, isn't that one of the things that you can kind of glean from when he does interviews, is it's sort of like whoever's right in front of him, Joe Rogan is kind of suggestible, he'll be convinced. Once they're gone, maybe he'll have a different opinion, but in the moment, but at least we'll let somebody else go over there and try to sort out war in Iran. Donald Trump and his kids are going to show up and take in the UFC.
That's right.
Well, who else would have made Hokit v. Lewis, mate? You know what I mean? We wouldn't be talking about this right now.
True.
Had 45.
Give the man the credit.
Come on. Look, we had a great moment again. On the back of Chiesa in Seattle, we have Cub Swanson return tonight in Miami. And what a beauty, man.
You want to talk about a dumb pick? A dumb pick. I was the lone idiot who went the other way.
You went Nate the Train on this?
I did, like an idiot. And I went back and forth on this. I sold myself on it in the end. I'm like, you know what? He's 42 years old. We don't get nice things.
It's tough.
Landwehr's going to pull this up. I was thinking of that David Onama fight, like where he just wouldn't die. Yeah. He came back, and I was like, I think he's going to survive it, and then he's going to pull it out in the end, that type of thing. What an idiot.
I gotta say, I was surprised at Nate Landwehr's strategy, or at least what we got.
Did you see a strategy there? Yeah.
Well, that guy, I would think if I were in Nate Landwehr's corner, I'd be like, "Hey, man, get in his face. Go out there. Don't let him decide where and when we have these exchanges." Like, you got to go in there and you got to blitz this dude, put him on the back foot. Because if you stand back there and let Cub Swanson find his rhythm and get a chance to work, he can still do that, man. He is sharp. Yeah. He looks sharp as hell in this one. And that's not Nate Landwehr's game.
That shot.
He does not do well when he does that. And especially against like Cub Swanson, like that, you're giving him the best chance he can have in that fight by sort of hanging back and waiting for him to decide what to do. Like, that's just not how I would have gone about it. And yet also I could see maybe Nate Landwehr is feeling a little gun shy after some of the stuff that he's gotten himself into more recently. But I do think, I wrote about this in my takeaways column afterwards. Like, booking a retirement fight like this is harder than people think, because you don't want to do the thing where you just feed the old guy to a young guy, because you'll make us sad. And you'll make us angry. Yeah. No one wants to see it, especially for a guy who's as beloved as Cub Swanson. Like, it's amazing that Cub Swanson's been in this sport for as long as he had. And you guys know this. Nobody has anything bad to say about him, which that's true of almost nobody in this sport who has been at it for as long as he has. Like, he's basically been a pro fighter for essentially like 2/3 of the UFC's entire existence. And that is wild. There's so many different evolutions that have happened in MMA over that time. you've lived through so many different eras of this sport, and to still be able to come out in the UFC and look that good and be a relevant fighter at that point is amazing. And it's also like you don't want to just throw the guy a squash match in his retirement fight because he might win it and decide like I still feel pretty good.
That's what he looked so good tonight that did cross my mind. I was like, how'd you go out when you're like, oh man, I'm feeling it? Because he wasn't even putting his hands up. It was like once he started kind of getting into rhythm, he's like, I can just tee off on this dude. That's what he did, right? And like when the fight is that easy, it's almost like the same thing with Michael Chiesa recently in the Seattle fight with Nico. Like they had such an easy night that I'm sure that there will be a, man, am I quitting too soon? You know, there's going to be that thing because that's how all fighters think in the end. But I'm going to take Cub at his at face value just because, you know, he had his kids in there and I know his wife was in there and all that stuff. It feels like he's ready to turn the page. But dude, that was in terms of retirement fights, so that was one of the better ones, just to be able to go in there and still look like you have it on that level.
Yeah. Well, and I saw him a clip of him talking to reporters backstage afterwards where he was like, no, I am done. This stuff hurts. Yeah. Fighting hurts.
Yeah,
I believe. And especially, you know, I did that story last year where we kind of just like told the entire story of his career through the injuries and stuff he had suffered. And he had been through some rough ones, you know.
That's right. Yeah.
And so like he came by that feeling honestly. You know, he knows that this sport hurts.
Jeez.
He's really been through it. And it's a good reminder, I think, the legacy that he leaves behind. It's not, you know, that he was a UFC champion. It's not that he went out there and won them all, but it's that like he always carried himself and fought in this way that everybody respected him. Everybody knew like Cub Swanson is an honorable, respectable guy. Nobody has anything bad to say about him. There's no like trail of bitterness and anger toward him. Everybody just saw the way he went about his business and where it's just like, that's the way to do it. And to end on that note and to see the kind of love that he's gotten from fans, from media, and from fellow fighters, like I hope that's a reminder to some fighters like, yeah, hey, you know, it'd be great to be Khabib and to never lose a fight. That's going to be the reality for almost no one. And so if you can't do that, the part that you can control better is what kind of human being you are.
It is interesting to see like who the UFC books these guys against in their last fight when they know it's going to be their last fight. For instance, you know, if it's somebody like Cub, who I think the UFC likes, it's Nate Landwehr. But like with Nate Diaz, you know, it's going to be Chimaev. And back in the day, like Couture, they had a lot of problems with. He goes against Lyoto Machida. You know, they like sometimes they kill you off on your last fight. And at least with these guys, they were like I'm talking about Michael Chiesa too. At least they seem to have been like, all right, let's give them a fight they should win. You know, like let's give them a fight that's a good matchup for them.
Well, you know, and that is something that Michael Chiesa talked about when I talked to him after his retirement fight, where he was like, you know, he was comparing it with some other guys in the way that they've gone out. And he was like, I had the advantage of getting to fight my last couple years sort of outside the rankings just because I wasn't a top guy. Like I wasn't, you know, if you're still like the number 5 ranked guy and you're earning huge money and you're an ex-champion every time you go out there, he's like, they're not going to give you any easy fights. And I, you know, didn't get easy fights, but also they were like the value of trying to get somebody else a win off of Michael Chiesa in his last fight is not really there. It's more of it works better if it's a feel good moment where he goes out there and you can't control who wins or loses, but at least put him in a fight stylistically that is going to be fun and that is going to feel reasonable and fair. And I think that's what they tried to do with Cub Swanson here is they looked around, they were like, who's going to go out there, plant their feet and throw with Cub Swanson? And Nate Landwehr is a good choice for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looked great, and all the best in your retirement, Cub Swanson. There was a lot of action on the undercard, of course. Aaron Pico wins the Battle of Bellatorians when he faced Patricio Pitbull. Kevin Holland beat Randy Brown. Gamrot submitted Esteban Rivovich very, very quickly. Tatiana Suarez did a very similar job on Lupita Godinez. Markel Medeiros and Chris Padilla. Originally a win for Padilla, and my option to pick him as my extra fighter, I feel they should give me the win because he clearly won. There is no way that this should have been a majority draw. It's an absolute disgrace. Medeiros did not deserve to come away with anything as far as I'm concerned. Am I saying that because I picked Padilla? Yeah,
Yes.
I am.
Give me
Well,
a
anyways,
fucking break.
Thank you. Vicente Luque gets a dash choke win over Kelvin Gastelum. Another big underdog with a big win. Charles Radke got things started with a win over Francisco Prado. I just wanted to run through those very quickly before I ask these two gentlemen about a big signing for the UFC. Gable Steveson, blue chip prospect. We did Casey did a brilliant documentary about him on the Uncrowned Network. You can go and look at that now. John Jones in his corner. He appeared with John Jones on the broadcast today. He will be making his debut at International Fight Week, July 11th. The card that everyone seems to think that McGregor would be targeting should he return. Big deal. Big prospect. We're in need of stars at heavyweight. Chuck, are you excited? And who, if you have any ideas, would you match him against?
Man, I am excited because although I will say this, like Stevenson was signed to the WWE, right? Like he never even made one appearance. So sometimes I'm like, it still feels very like wait and see on this.
Jake
I know
Paul,
that the
PFL.
UFC. Yeah, I think that once you're kind of announced at the UFC, this is really happening. But I'm just throwing it out there that we've been through some excitement with this guy before. But dude, like we went from having a heavyweight division that might have been the worst we've ever seen it to a couple of things that happened tonight that you're like, all right, well, wait a minute. Maybe there's some things that are starting to happen that will make it fun again. I think getting Stevenson's own Hokit kind of going in there and having that fight was a big deal. I honestly, like in the Bo Nickel sense, I wouldn't mind just seeing him go against some guy, who's not even, I know that the top 15 isn't exactly a star-studded place, but if it's somebody in that space, it should be, the 15th through 13th type of guy. I think he should start slow. And because it is heavyweight. I don't want to see him go on there and take some big punch by a guy, and then that's kind of, it deflates the whole thing. I'd rather see him get a little bit slower build, and because people are going to pay attention just on his name alone, right? He's the A side of whatever the matchup's going to be. I would build him slow.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is when you look at heavyweight, not just in the UFC but across MMA, it's like you have two different divisions essentially. You have like the top 5 to 8 people in the UFC, and really when you get down to it, like the top 3 people who really seem to matter, and then you have everybody else. You have like a bunch of guys who get cut from a community college football team, or a bunch of guys who just don't care to diet down to 205. And that's kind of what makes it hard to tell what to make of Gable so far, because you see him in some of these fights and you're just like, the size, the speed, and the agility and the power. See a big guy move like that, you go, this dude should come in and take over. But then again, he is fighting the Uber drivers essentially. He's fighting a bunch of fights where we went and we found him somebody to beat the crap out of, and he did it. And when you bring him into the UFC, it's sort of like do you want to just drop him right in the deep end right away and find out, like we essentially did to Brock Lesnar when he came in, and we were just like, all right, give him Frank Mir, throw him somebody like that right off the bat.
Kind of crazy to think back on that now, isn't it?
Yeah,
they really did throw him into a fire right away.
And I don't think that they really want to do that here. I get the sense they'd want to do something a little slower, but it's also like, remember what we did with Greg Hardy, where you're essentially going out there trying to find people who Greg Hardy can beat and not even nailing that. Even when that was the only thing you were trying to do, you couldn't do it very reliably. So, I think that he's going to be a much better prospect than Greg Hardy. My first thought when I saw this news that he had signed with the UFC is I was like, man, you didn't want to wait and see maybe what MVP MMA
That's what I was thinking,
might cook up for you, because they seem like they
right?
Yeah, they seem like maybe they'd give you a whole bunch of money to come in one night, fight somebody on Netflix, you get paid, increase your star power, because what we don't see very often these days in the UFC is a free agent signing of somebody who can actually drive their own price up a little bit. Normally we see people who they're coming in off the Contender Series, or they're coming in, to fill a gap in a existing fight card, and they get one of these sort of take it or leave it entry level deals. And he should get more than that. He should get a lot more than that just because he already has a name. He's already somebody. Like, how often do we even see it now where it's like, big news, the UFC has signed this guy? There's almost none of that anymore. It's always just sort of like, this guy made his way through the pipeline to this point and you don't know who he is. Like, to sign a guy who we already know who he is, that's rare. Hopefully he was able to leverage that and get a really good deal out of it. But the amount they're paying him might also dictate how quickly they want to throw him in there and get some return on the investment.
He would have been a classic Scott Coker signing, right? Like from back in the day, like when he was signing all those wrestlers.
Yes.
It would have been like, that would have been his big get from Bellator days.
Absolutely. Speaking of heavyweights, Tyson Fury, his 5th retirement has come and gone. He is back. He has won a fight against, I think it's legitimately his 5th retirement as well. He beat Makhmudov tonight at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London. Not a lot of winning happening there of late for Tottenham Hotspur, of course, but looking really, really good. As far as I'm concerned, you know, I expected a bit of a dip from Tyson tonight. I think he lost 2 of the rounds and not by much, and I think he moved very well. Obviously, AJ seated by the ring, and immediately when you see these 2 guys in the same room, you're like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. This is great. Of course, Tyson immediately, you know, says to AJ, you know, say you'll fight me now. He says he'll fight him now. Then all of the interviews afterwards are like Eddie Hearn, like, well, we need a fight before we fight Tyson, and we're immediately back where we've been for the last fucking 15 years. And believe me, I completely sympathize with the fact that Anthony Joshua has had a horrific accident and lost 2 people very close to him. And it's a horrific situation. But I really, really feel like we are getting very close to a time when these 2 cannot fight. And you just got to strike while the iron's hot. You gotta make it while they're both ready and willing. Am I crazy, Chuck? Or
no,
it's not.
I mean, it's set up. You know, it's set up to happen. Am I like Turkey Al-Sheikh on that telecast? Did he not just say, "Hey, we have a big announcement coming tonight"? Like, is he just speaking out of turn at this point? Because he did this with the UFC. Like,
no, he loves to speak out of turn. He loves.
It's so funny, isn't it?
And he wanted
so
AJ in, and AJ wouldn't move. AJ was like,
"Oh,
"No, I'm sitting down. I'm not taking his moment. I'm going to sit right here." And so you could tell everyone was awkwardly shifting because AJ has not done what probably has been requested of him. So very, very strange stuff. Sorry, I cut you off there, boys.
No, the thing about saying, like, I understand why, like, with everything he's gone through recently, you'd be like, we might not be ready to jump right into that. But also, there's no interest really in much else for him right now. Go ahead and do that fight, make a whole bunch of money. And at this point in his career, it's like, if you go in there and you fight him and you lose, so what? You know, you might as well go in there and try it now. Now's the only opportunity you're going to get. And if you miss this window to fight Tyson Fury, then what do you do? You know, there's not that much stuff out there for you at this point. You might as well take this chance now. And it's like, especially, I understand saying like, hey, you know, bad car accident, you know, the physical and emotional trauma to come out of that. But it's not like that stuff's not going to be real for you getting into a training camp for somebody else. You know, that's going to be something you work through regardless. So you might as well be working through it for a whole bunch of money.
How many times is Fury going to retire? Like, I feel like the John Jones, you know, he's at the event tonight and they were talking to him and he's like, no, I'm more of the coach now. I'm not a fighter again. So like he's back to retire. How many times we go through with these guys? I feel like Fury has retired. Who's to check?
Who's to check is right.
There's I saw 2 competing clips out today. One of John Jones being like, "Yeah, I'm done. John Jones, the fighter, is done," and another one of just being like, "Yeah, I'm doing the stem cells. I'm feeling good," you know, and just like so. Like I'll say this:
that's not like John to contradict himself, Ben. I don't know what this
reminds me of the news that I watch every day these days. 2 contradicting reports. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck.
In the same day.
At least when Tyson Fury comes out of retirement, he comes out of retirement and he fights. You know, I'll give him that. Like as long as like he's not just like saying he's unretired and then never showing up and fighting. Like he'll get in there and do it, and then he will retire again. I love how now he's wielding it as a threat. He's basically just being like, "Fight me or I'll get fat and I'll retire again." Don't think I won't do it.
Believe him.
We're like he will do it.
It's obviously this was the main event of this is the main event, but in the chief support, it was Conor Benn's 15 million pound debut or whatever it was, because it was meant to be with Zuffa Boxing. Happens on the ring card. He fights Regis Prograis, a blown up Regis Prograis. Yeah, sorry, Rougarou. He looks really bad weighing in for this fight, and he wants to get lower, right? He wants to go down to 147. I believe this was 150. Prograis only fought there once before. Kind of gives him a competitive few rounds, and all of the talk afterwards, I've been kind of listening to the reaction, albeit like from a lot of Matchroom affiliated people. They're kind of saying, you're talking about Conor Benn beating one of these 147-pound champions. Regis Prograis retired after this fight. He was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And a lot of people were saying beforehand, like, he is finished. I can tell you, his legs looked really bad in this fight. From the very first exchange, his knees seemed to be buckling. He looked like an older fighter. The speed was gone. He had to kind of use more tact than explosivity, anything like this. But Conor Benn couldn't put him away. I guess my question to you, Ben, is like, is this very underwhelming considering the media storm that surrounded him, leaving Eddie Hearn, getting paid 15 million, becoming the scourge of UFC stars for a number of days? Did this fall flat?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with creating such a media storm around the signing and the money behind it and everything is that then everybody is going to turn right around and in that very next fight look at you and be like, am I watching a $15 million fighter right now?
Yes.
Am I watching, yes. Like everybody is going to view it through that lens, especially because it's like they paid you all that money to come in here for one fight on this card. Kind of feels like they're going to put you in a situation to be successful. Like that's what they're going to look for you. And so when you go in there and, you don't look like much, you don't really blow anybody's hair back with the effort in that, then people are going to be like, they overpaid for this guy. This guy isn't worth it, I mean, good for him for getting that payday. And especially if you can get that payday on a one fight deal and then turn around afterwards and be like, who would like to negotiate? That's how you ought to do it. I can't hate on him at all for that. But he also didn't exactly come out of that where you're looking at it and being like, well, somebody ought to pay him 25 million for the next one.
Yeah. Well, that's what's weird about it. It's like the precedent of like, oh, we made 15 million for this. What is it supposed to get for this next one? But if we're sitting here, we're talking about juxtaposition. A guy just left the sport, Cub Swanson, 42 years old. I don't know how many fights he had. Was it 46, 47 fights, something like that?
26 in the UFC anyway. I know
yeah.
which that was 26.
So like all those fights, how close do you think he came to $15 million? I mean, I don't think he's within binocular range of that. I don't think that he made that anywhere near that in the course of his career. So that's, I mean, it is like, it's a glaring thing that way, right?
Especially, he was telling, when I did the story about, all his injuries and everything, he was telling me about the days early on in his career where he was like, I had to borrow money from people to go get my hand fixed, just like stuff like that, where I was taking fights hurt just so I could get the health insurance from the promoter so that I could claim I hurt it in the fight and get surgery afterwards. Like, that was what he was dealing with. So it was a long, long way from
his debut at WEC, like 26, I think it was. He said he told me he got $3,000. That was his show money against Jose Aldo. He got $5,000. I mean, so if you're just looking at those, if you're just looking at those type of thing, the flying knee, that's for $5,000. I know
before
the WEC
taxes,
was a different
before deductions. It was worth the $5,000 went further back then. It was inflation has
that's the equivalent of like 8,500 now. I mean, it's wild though. It's just wild to contemplate on the same day. You watch the UFC, you see a guy like him, and you see Ben in his $15 million performance. It makes you think about that,
Yeah. No, it's weird. And honestly, to both of your points, it did feel as though they were propping up Prograis for a KO. Everything, like short notice camp, everything. Like this guy was known to be on the way out. And then make him fight much heavier than he's been against a guy who last fought at 160, and it just didn't come off. It didn't come off. And you got to remember, he's pretty much fighting at home there, Conor Benn. And the crowd I thought he'd get a big boo and he had this villain kind of atmosphere going because of the matchroom thing. The crowd seemed more disinterested than anything else, which is even worse.
That's
right?
the worst thing to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I was hoping he'd lean into this bad boy thing, but he's gone the other way. To be honest, all his pre-fight interviews have been kind of trying to reimagine himself as a different kind of guy. Whereas I thought he'd play into the idea of everybody hates me. Oh yeah, I got paid, whatever the fuck, like kind of do a Mayweather thing. Didn't really go for it. Nobody seemed to really be overawed by him. And again, the performance hasn't seemed to do much either. I'm looking forward to seeing what they'll do next with him. I have a very serious question I want to ask you guys. Either of you can answer. Did either of you know that a PFL event was on tonight? No bullshit. Like, PFL Chicago happened tonight. I had it on my iPad, and all I could think while I'm trying to keep an eye on the fights and watch the UFC is, why the fuck? Why would you do this? At the same time, the UFC event is on. You know you're not the co-leader. You know this isn't going to happen. Why in the name of Christ would you do this? Is that too severe?
I only know because I got the emails. I got the press,
Shout out Lauren Mack.
emails. Yeah, and you're just kind of like, oh, okay. I did not know that was going on. But and also just like wondering, like, I do wonder, like, who's the live audience for that? Because
did not seem to be many.
Because it's like, if you're a fight fan, if you're a big enough fight fan that you want to go watch the PFL, then you're probably also interested, at least, in what's happening in the UFC that night. You know, and so
you'd imagine so, right?
Yeah, that's a tough sell. You know, that's
Pete, how was
why.
I had it on mute, like, you know, I'm just watching it because I'm like, I'm gonna have to mention that this happened tonight. I was like, how can you? I watched Anthony Pettis got fairly routed there in the main event against Mitchell McKee. Rufian Stotts lost to a man called Kavalov. Yeah, it was, it was a card and it was on, and I was just,
who gives a shit?
There we go. Thank you, Dana, who has just been in my ear there. We obviously need to move on from this horrific subject, but please, PFL, we're worried about your future. Let's not do this on the same night as a UFC pay-per-view, okay?
Yeah. What'd you call it? Knockout Derby? What was your name for it? Knockout
World.
Something.
Okay?
World. Knockout World, yes.
Knockout World Chicago?
Knockout World. Yeah.
A lot more.
I would have tuned in for that,
Knockout World.
But not PFL.
Yeah. Then you get a bunch of split majority decisions and everybody's like, Knockout World sucks.
What can you do? All you can do is kind of, try to entice the masses. But listen, we've done a lot of things here today. We came on, we spoke to you wonderful people about UFC 327, Tyson Fury, Conor Benn, PFL Chicago. How could we forget? If this is not enough for you, beautiful MMA enthusiasts, Ryzen has just started. Go and get the pay-per-view. It's happening in Japan. It's a fantastic event. We're not going to come back after Ryzen, okay? We're not going to do that. This is all we've got in us today. Please come back on Monday. ArielHelwani will be back. The full schedule is back. The boys in the back who you saw earlier, they'll also be back. Frank is back. Andy's back. Don't know if Jordan's back yet. I don't
Vacation.
know.
Who's to check?
Nope.
Yeah.
No, okay.
He's on his 63rd vacation.
Josh, it's Josh. I'm rambling again, okay? Can we play the music? I need to get out of here. I'm losing my mind. Thank you so much, everybody.
No super chats? We don't
Super chats.
No, doesn't seem to be any super chats. Thank you, Ben.
Spirit
Love
of
you all
Josh
very
Hokit.
much. Thank you, Chuck and Ben. Thank you, Andy and Frank. Thank you, everybody. $30 million for the kitchen scrap.